Hey guys, welcome back to the shack, and today I want to do a follow-up on a video I did earlier. A couple of weeks ago I got my new dust collection system in from Shopsmith, and I did a quick little reveal and kind of a quick flyover of the machine, but at the time I hadn't used it a whole lot, and so I wanted to kind of touch base back with you after a couple of weeks of a lot of CNC projects, because that's the way I've got mine set up currently. Is it runs for the CNC. That's where I needed that extra lower level of noise to kind of allow me to be able to hear myself think in the shop and not necessarily have to always, wear hearing protection, because sometimes I have people in that I want to talk to that are watching the machine and that type of thing. So this is going to be a little more in-depth a couple of weeks later, what I think, how I've kind of grown to the machine, and we're going to cover a little bit of the assembly process. Not a lot, because there's not much more to cover than just read the book. So if that's something you're into, stick around and we'll be right back. All right, so first off, it has performed as well as I had hoped. And guys, I've run quite a few CNC jobs on this machine, and so far I am nowhere near filled up the bag on the unit. I did the other day, just out of curiosity, I decided to go ahead and take the top cover, the filter part off, take it outside, dust it out, see how bad it was obstructed, if any, and it was very, very minimal, which was surprising. But if you look at the size of the filter on the top, the surface area of the interior of that thing, that's quite a substantial filter to be filtering out the really, really fine particulates and stuff. All of the bigger, heavier pieces fall down into the bag right out of the gate. So in my opinion, you probably could, clean that thing out once every couple of weeks, maybe. Maybe a week if you're really, really running it heavy. Just clean the top filter out, and you don't have to change the bag out on the bottom. Taking the top filter loose basically just entails taking a hose clamp, a really large hose clamp loose, remove that thing. I took it outside, kind of turned it inside out, gave it a few shakes, and then I took the air hose and just kind of blew the dust out of it, put it back on, and we're good to go. So hopefully it's going to be very low maintenance, because that's one thing that I don't like having to do in my shop, is I don't have to like having equipment that is just really finicky. You know how it is. Those machines or those tools that if you don't clean them like continually, they don't operate. And so far, that's not what I'm seeing with the Shopsmith. Now, you can clean it as often as you want. I'm sure they probably have in their manual how often you should clean it. In my opinion, that's going to depend a lot on the materials. If you're running materials such as MDF and some other materials that create a lot of dust, of course it's going to be more frequent. If you're running a really heavy cutter, like maybe just a flat end mill where you're getting a lot of bigger chips and not a lot of dust, then you're going to wind up with less maintenance having to be done, because you're not going to have as many small particulates. It's going to depend a lot on the material. And even this week, I've been able to do a little bit of surfacing on some epoxy jobs that I did, and it done a really good job on that. Now, I will say, epoxy, of course, when you're doing the flattening pass on the projects, that stuff like holds a lot of static electricity, so it sticks to everything. It doesn't get scooped up as well. Most of it you'll find will wind up adhered to the brush on your dust boot. So at one point I was just like, you know what, we're just going to make a mess, clean it up with a shop vac later, because even though the Shopsmith was sucking in the bigger pieces like the clumps and so forth, there was a lot of little stringers that were flying everywhere and just sticking to everything because of the static electricity. But so far, guys, the machine has performed well. It's really, really quiet. It has changed the whole feeling of the shop, the whole dynamic, because those shop vacs running will give you a headache if you don't wear hearing protection, which I usually do with the shop vacs, because I know they're gonna irritate me. And even with some of the other dust collection systems that I use, they're a little more than you want to sit and listen to. But so far with the Shopsmith, it's performed really, really well. Within reason, if you have the means to do so, you could run the CNC and other tools on the machine at the same time. I don't see where that would be a problem, especially if your hose and your blast gates are set up properly. But I'm also promised you guys that I'd kind of briefly touch on the assembly of the machine. I did the assembly by myself. A couple of the pieces are a little bulky as far as, you know, holding them in place. So you'll either need to use maybe some clamps or, you know, a cardboard box as a spacer, or just get a friend to help hold the end of one of the pieces while you start the bolts. Because that was the hardest part. Was there was a couple of the bigger pieces that had to be held in place and the bolts had to be started. And it was a little awkward trying to hold the piece and start the bolt at the same time by myself. Now, I could have gotten some, you know, green tape and taped that thing in position and then started the bolts. But I just went ahead and did it the way that the instructions said, which was just to hold it and put it together. But as you can see, a lot of the hose that I'm using is just 2.5 inch dust collection hose that you can buy off of Amazon. But the machine itself comes with a pretty lengthy piece of hose, and if you have the correct dimension hose on the other end, it's not a big deal to just connect it to the existing hose that they send. The 2.5 inch will slide over that, and then just put a clamp on there, tighten her down good. And even though my chip extraction is going up, and this is a pretty good little loft right here for chip extraction to be pulling chips up. I had considered moving it down a little lower, but with the large work area of the CNC, because this is the Shapeco 5 Pro with the 4 foot by 4 foot work area, it allows the hose to move to all 4 corners without any issues. I did have to make myself a little sleeve. I 3D printed myself a little sleeve to go inside this hose to kind of give it a little rigidity and keep it from just dragging all over the steppers here. And all that is basically just a tube that I printed on the 3D printer and inserted into the hose. So I'll kind of give you an overview of what this thing is putting up with, because this machine moves from corner to corner. And yes, the CNC is not quiet when it's rapid moving. So that right there is the farthest reach in that corner, and that is, so when the chip extraction is running, that's the direction that it's pulling the chips when I use that back corner of the workspace, which isn't that often. And then on the other side here, move the camera around where you can see. On the other side of that work area, this is why I feel like the angle and the length of hose that I'm using works really well, is because now it's still quite the length, but I've got enough slack that it's not putting pressure on anything, and the system just stays together really well. I was a little skeptical at first, but so far so good. So if you have a larger CNC and you're gonna have to have your chip extraction up high like this, then don't worry about whether or not the Shopsmith can handle it. Technically, I could shorten the length of pull on the hose, because I do actually have a little extra hose over here, and I had thought about bringing this black hose on over and removing some of the excess to limit the pull, but so far I haven't had a problem with extraction, and so I'm just running it like it is. Assembly, and I'll try to throw the video up here so that you guys can kind of see it as we talk about it. All the materials as far as packaging, I got them, nothing was damaged, nothing was missing, all the bolts that I needed were there. It did take me using the manual and just kind of following along the steps to get it put together, but I would say probably 30 minutes or so. I had it completely assembled, went back and double checked everything, made sure all my bolts were tight, all the clamps were where they needed to be, and I was able to put power to the unit and get it up and running. The design is fairly simplistic, and it's from a warranty standpoint, I don't see any major problems with anything that could go wrong, and it's relatively, the way the components are laid out, it would be relatively easy to, you know, down the road just order replacement parts for the machine and put them in with relative ease. Like I said, the actual fan and the fan housing is the largest part of the machine. The rest of it, there's not a whole lot of points of failure. There's no mechanical failures. I did notice that they do have a capacitor, which is going to be a startup capacitor, and we're all used to those. such as in air conditioners and stuff like that. So after many years, there is a chance that the capacitor could go bad and might have to be replaced, as capacitors do. But the way that they've got it put together, it's in there with some adhesive tape inside the frame. You really wouldn't even have to disassemble the machine to take that capacitor out, unplug it, plug another one in, and get back up and going. So that's the basic build, guys, is really, really simple. I know this machine has been around for a long time. It used to be called the I think it was a DC-300 or 3000. The new model, the one that I have, is the DC-6000. And so far, I'm really pleased with it. And I just want to say thanks again to Shopsmith for letting me try this guy out and working with me on getting it set up for my CNC, because that has been a major issue in my shop for those CNC jobs that took an extensive amount of time. Was it just got so noisy and it just wasn't fun. But thanks to them, I can now say that running the CNC is much, much more pleasurable as far as having to stay in the shop and keep an eye on things and make sure nothing goes wrong. So if you're into CNCs, if you have a CNC and you're looking for a quiet dust collection system that has massive capacity, because this thing has the capacity of a large trash can. You're looking at, I would say, probably 30-gallon bag, 40. But this thing, I'll have to look at the specs, and I'll try to drop that up here as far as the bag size. But it's going to take a long time for me doing CNC projects to fill this up. All right, guys, so that's going to be it for today. Like I said, I just wanted to do a couple of week follow-up on the Shopsmith. The last video I did wasn't quite a review. It was more or less why I chose to upgrade to the Shopsmith. But I hope this gives you a little better understanding of the advantages that I have found with it, being lower noise, higher capacity than any shop vac that you're going to use, as well as the massive size of the air filter on the top of it, which is going to enable you to go longer without having to clean that according to the materials. Of course, there's a lot of variables there. But from my perspective, for what I use it for, having this larger filter surface that isn't sitting in the chips per se, like some of the other machines, is going to allow it to run longer without having to be cleaned or emptied. So of course, you still need to service your machine, but maybe not just as often. But until next time, guys, if you're interested in the machine, I will put a link down in the description below. Go check those guys out. Like I said, so far this machine has performed really well, and I don't see any reason why it won't continue to do so for years to come. So go check the link out if you're interested, and until next time, guys, be safe and have a good day.